is like. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Did the Wi-Fi work okay?
Yep, worked perfectly. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Sebastian, by the way.
I'm Paul.
Nice to meet you.
You too. Did Bill, your Wi-Fi work?
You know what? I gave my sheet to Mitch, so I gotta go get another one.
Yeah, it's not really scarcity, so you can take a couple. But I have been told that sometimes there's an expired one in the batch, so just make sure. I'm just checking to make sure it
There's an
works.
expired one. Okay.
Are you gonna try to live stream it?
Yeah, we should actually be live right now.
And have people joined in the past?
Usually typically get like.
Well, last month was only a successful one, so.
Yeah.
Or no, it was June.
June. It was like a couple of
July
months
was,
ago. Yeah, people join here and there. It's also nice for me because like I edit the videos and post them up to YouTube afterwards, so I can just from the live stream just automatically upload to YouTube, so I don't have to worry about that editing part.
Cool. Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
And then does it give you real-time metrics? Like 2 people are on.
Yeah, I can check YouTube
5
Studio for that.
Yeah, and we had, I don't know, a handful on in our first one, June.
Yeah, I want to say, yeah, we did. I wasn't paying too much attention to it because it was our first time doing it, so I was kind of like running around making sure everything was working. But yeah,
Cool. Let me know if you need anything.
all right. I'm gonna grab.
So I'm gonna flip this out so that
Is that
right? You want this right to do the feed and for the slides?
I have my adapter. All we need to do is plug it in. I just don't
Okay.
know. I just don't know how to plug it in. It's only has one HDMI port, so
Okay, so I have a splitter.
okay, let's try that. I don't know if it will work or not, but we'll see.
Should. It's a powered splitter, so I can plug it in, but other than that.
Okay.
This is a short code. This is a short thing. So there's a splitter.
That's the
So we want this as right there, and then I could do chord
yeah.
from there to there.
Yep, that's what we want. I think just kind of get a bigger cord.
Bigger chord or longer or short?
Longer one, yeah, because you can just put this on the floor.
This is my medium.
Yeah,
Medium.
that'll work.
So we're gonna do the lightning talk first.
Okay.
Maybe that still works. Up.
I mean, it is because you get the HDMI, like you get sound coming through.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's.
There you go.
Yeah, let me just on my end.
Nice.
I don't have anything on my end yet, but let me. That's.
So you weren't at WeWork today?
No, I didn't go downtown today. I was just, I was coming from the burbs. But, yeah. I do like the office. It's just a pain to get there from my house.
Which one is it at? What street?
It's in the West Loop. It's
Oh,
167. Yeah, it's like the brand new one. It's really nice, but I'm also not like I'm not like an everyday office person, so it's kind of hard.
Yeah. 2-hour, commute each way. Still like it though, just all the walking around and meeting up with people and just, lunch, just all that stuff is just a different way of life down here.
It's Mitch, right? Mitch has Mitch is doing the presentation and Paul's doing the presentation.
Or not Paul, Steve first. But maybe Paul.
Maybe he's left out.
My splitter isn't working?
I'm pretty sure this one, like, it just, it's not.
Okay.
Double check, did I plug it? Might be it too. No, it's still plugged in.
Do you want me to get you anything?
I'll just grab some of it later. It's all good.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Huh. Let's turn on the screen. Is it not working? Fuck. It's weird.
Are you ready, Sebastian? Ready for it?
Yeah.
So there's two things we're missing out. There's this, but there's also this. Yes.
So, how many, do you have any 1H?
Yeah.
One, okay. Any USB-C ports on that one?
This is my wife's.
Oh, there's one. Is it?
No, it's like the lock thing.
Lock thing? It's like one.
No C's.
Okay, let's try, we can try this one then. So, like this one, your end. Sweet, it's showing up on your end, so let's see if it shows up on my end. Okay, so it's not showing up on my end. Huh, that's weird. Okay. Hey Bill, do you have a USB, a C cable?
Yeah.
You have a USB-C cable?
I don't know, because, well, actually. This is USB to a bunch of different things. You need that?
I don't know if my adapters 100% working. Like, I don't know if there's a cable broke or my adapter broke.
I didn't bring my main backpack this time, and because it's just so damn heavy.
Yeah.
And so I just loaded up a bunch of just core stuff with this one, and I have that stuff, but I don't have like a ton.
Yeah.
So maybe they do. Maybe their systems person does. If you need something else.
No, it should be all good. It's just that, My USB-C, I don't know, I think my adapter might have broke, or not my adapter, my capture card, so I just want to troubleshoot.
I have like a USB-C charger cable.
That might work. I'm just gonna try this right now, because I don't know if the cable itself broke, or... Yeah. It's no bueno. That's weird.
Oh man, that's weird.
Here you go, Bill. I think my capture card might be broken. Mind if I just plug that in? Huh. That's weird. Yeah, it looks like my capture card.
Oh no.
Yeah. That's not cool. That's whatever.
Do you want to use mine?
Yeah, we could use a capture card. I just like, for the live stream, it just won't, I just won't stream, like, the slides to the thing.
What about if you get mine to work?
Is it the Valve one, right?
What?
The Valve one doesn't work with macro drivers.
Oh,
Yeah,
shit.
that's why I brought mine. Yeah, it's all good. It's like old fashioned Meetup.
So, what do you want to do?
I'll just record the screen.
The old-fashioned way?
Yeah. And then I'm gonna go. I guess I need to. That's weird. It was working lately. Like, it usually has like a little white light that shines. So like, it was just working literally like 10 seconds ago, and then I looked at it right now, and it wasn't working. So I wonder if I might just plug it into the splitter. Might not like the splitter. But I'll see. I'll just have to do a bit more testing and I'll figure it out. Okay, we got this. And mute that up.
Oh.
Yeah, be careful. Teach main character. Okay, let's do that.
Cool. Maybe since we're not using that splitter, we try to just go straight to the TV.
Yeah, let's just go straight to the
Because it's crackling and cutting in and out just from standing here, not touching anything.
Oh, you're good.
Cool.
turn you on.
The TV's over here, you might want to.
That one's not gonna show, right?
Slides.
That one's not gonna show, yeah. So if you guys wanna scoot over.
There should be enough room for everybody over here, right?
We're good.
No, I just am for, I'm doing the next talk.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending this month's React Chicago. As you already know, food is plenty available if you ever want to get some more beverages. The bathrooms are down the hall. You can take it right from the elevator bank. Thank you to Mintel Group for hosting us. This is the first time, and hopefully we'll get to check out the new digs once you move. That'll be cool. So yeah, thank you for doing that. We got 2 talks tonight. So we're going to start with more of the shorter talk, provided by an engineer here from Meetup, and then we'll move on to Mitch's talk afterwards. So but before that, let me introduce Paul, who's the VP of Engineering here at Meetup.
Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate you guys coming. We're happy to help out the React community. Mintel is a market research company. We have a huge engineering department, 100 people across 4 countries. We've got about 30 in Chicago, Belfast, and London, and then about 20 in Shanghai. We are building tools in React. Python is in our stack. We have a lot of machine learning going on. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn, Paul Millar Mintel, you'll find me. We'd love to chat if you guys are looking for jobs. Other than that, we have a main speaker in a little bit, but Steve, our senior engineer, is going to talk for 10-15 minutes about
State management.
State management. So
And design decisions.
turn it over to you, Steve. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Archer. Like Paul said, I'm a senior software engineer here at Mintel. I'm the tech lead on the CPG app team. It stands for Consumer Packaged Goods. We love acronyms here at Mintel. There's about 10,000 of them to learn. We build full stack apps with React on the front end. Always, we love React. And we build a lot of apps for data visualization. I'm gonna talk about kind of at least what my personal design process is when I'm going about designing one of these, especially around state and deciding what we use for state management. So we're gonna start super fundamental and super basic and talk about what state is in the first place, because that's gonna help us make our decisions if we can define it. Basic stuff, state is the current situation of your application. What's happening right then? No, that's wrong. I said the current situation. Yes, the current situation, because every situation changes over time. Your state's gonna change over time, but as it changes, what's important is keeping it as the source of truth for that bit of information. You wanna have one source of truth, you don't wanna have lots of sources of truth. So for that bit of information, you want that state to be in one place. If you have disagreement, you got 2 truths, they can't coexist together. No, that's no good. All right, so we kind of know what our state wants to do. What are our options for where to put this state? We'll start simple and then get more complex as we go down our options. The simplest one, React tutorial level stuff. If your component is simple, if the state is getting created in one spot, used in one component, it's not going anywhere else, you can just keep it right there in the component. This falls under the duh category. But when this information needs to be used in more than one place, that's when we need to use something a little more complex. In my opinion, the next level up in that complexity is React Context API. I don't think anyone can appreciate the Context API unless you're a React old schooler from the days before it existed. Because when that came, nothing more beautiful than when that finally became available. Because it's a real simple way to kind of fill that middle ground of a place to keep state that gets used in a bunch of spots. You don't want to go full out all the way to one of the, to Redux, to MobX, to one of the state management solutions. Some of my favorite ways to use context is keep it at the top and use it all over the place. User info. When our app needs to know who's using it, probably all over the place. We want to say hi, Steve, everywhere we can, right? We don't want to check every time. We keep it at the top, probably connected to auth. We can use it all, put it in context, and use it all over the place. We use it for feature flags. Here at Mintel, we use config-cat to manage our feature flag state. We use it a lot, and again, we only want to ask config-cat once about where those, what those feature flags are set to. Put it in one place. That way, every component all the way around our app is going to be guaranteed to have that same feature flag value. That one source of truth, again. Or input options. This is something we do over and over all the time. We're always asking the database, hey, what are the things the user can pick from? Give me a list of their choices. These are things that don't change very often. The list of countries in the world changes sometimes, but not very much. So we want to fetch it one time, maybe even cache it, and have it available all over the place, just that one source of truth. So one more option, I alluded to it before. I'm going to lump these all together, the state management libraries. Redux is the big one that some of you may have worked with. And these are the things that you use when things are getting really complex. The state is getting used all over the place. The state is getting manipulated all over the place. It's turning into a big mess. We have to keep things organized. And the more stuff we have to keep organized, the more shelves we need in the closet. We need a more complex closet organizer. They're a pain to put together. Redux is kind of a pain to get started. If you've never used it before, it's kind of a pain to wrap your head around. When I started here at Mintel, I started a junior dev thrown onto the Purchase Intelligence app, which uses Redux. I know how to do React, no problem. Oh, okay, cool. Write some actions, reducers, map state to props function. Redux, it's a whole other world. But it's worth it if you have a lot of state to manage. If you have a big, huge chunk of data that gets used differently on different visualizations all over your Purchase Intelligence app, and every one of these can trigger changes to that state at the same time, you want something that's going to keep things organized. You want Redux's framework of actions and reducers so the state's all in the same place. You know you're never going to get out of sync. So we got our options. What I really want to talk about is the process. How do we choose which of these we're going to do? We're starting from scratch. We could do anything at this point. But what's our thought process going to be? A couple rules that I think we should follow in this thought process. First, we should keep things simple. We should start from the simplest thing on our list and keep going. Don't jump all the way to Redux, because if things start to get too complex, we need to back up. This is something that's very dear to my heart. One of my favorite folksy idioms that I use all the time around here that annoys everybody. So I'm very excited to have a new group of faces to look at me like I'm crazy when I start talking about yaks, is don't shave the yak. Don't shave the yak means this. If you find yourself walking on a desert road leading a yak, and that yak starts to sweat, you have two options. You can pull out your electric clippers and you can start to shave the yak, or you can turn around, go back, and find someone to sell you a camel. So not only should you, the point is, not only should you choose the right tool for the job, but if you've made the wrong decision, it's always better to back up, choose the right thing, instead of trying to force your bad choices into work. So let's keep that in mind as we take a look at an imaginary Mintel app. We like acronyms, so we'll call it IMA, Imaginary Mental App. Products come to us with this MVP. This MVP could really describe a lot of mental apps. User inputs something, they get some data back. It's the simplest app you can build. So guess what? We're gonna start at the top of our list, like I said. We're gonna keep it simple. Something like this, you can do it in one component. You can keep the state of the user's search in the same place as the data that you just fetched, show it in the same spot. It does one thing. Keep it simple. We're not gonna add any state management, but you know what happens when a product has a simple MVP? We won't call it the scope creep, that's a dirty word, we'll call it iteration. The next iteration is new stuff. It's gotta do more than one thing. We start adding things. I mean, if we're keeping it simple, maybe we just pass that data down to the other things that need it. It needs to download something, it needs a new graph, it needs to fill in some text to explain things to the user. Just pass your props down, right? My personal rule of thumb is if I look at a component and I say, where the heck did this prop come from? And I have to go up more than one level, something is wrong. Let's back up. Let's try and use a different solution. Keep moving down our list, our complexity list. Context, probably a good idea here, right? We've still got our user search in state, but we're now sending that to a context provider because instead of just a dumb old stupid cool component, our context provider can provide that to anything. So our data is flowing much more nicely right now, and it's a lot easier to tell where that data came from. Uh-oh, we have more requirements. The URL needs to be shareable. I picked this because this is something we get asked for every single time. Our users at Mintel love a shareable URL. They want to be able to hit copy on the top of their browser, hit send it to somebody, hit paste, and they want to see exactly what they wanted to share show up on that screen. This, you know, it's a carryover from the bad old days of multi-page apps, right? In those days, everything was up in the query params. When the user did anything, that's a new URL, that's a new page load. Everything you need to know is right up there in the URL. And they like that. We, however, you and I, we are spa lovers, yes? We like single page apps. We don't want to do that. We want to have our state live down here in memory. We can maybe do something to work on this. This could be our first try. We could, from when the user sets their search, we could push that up into the URL. And then when they come to a page, the URL could tell this component what its state should start out as. That could probably work. But what I don't like to see is this loop, this circle. Data shouldn't be flowing in a circle like that. We're gonna have a bad time. We're gonna have some conflict. I bring it up because we've tried this. And guess what? Things get out of sync. The URL and the state start arguing with each other. And there are ways around it. You can be real careful and make it happen, but getting this angel and this devil to agree with each other while possible is kind of a sweaty yak. Yes, he's back. This is getting too complicated. Now is the time in the design process when things are not working great and everything we do is making it a little worse. That's the time to back up, turn around. Let's see if we can find a camel instead. Let's borrow something, maybe, from the bad old days of the multi-page app. When you go to that multi-page app and you got the query parameters up there, that's the state of the app at that time. The page loads, that's the state of what's happening. Maybe we go outside the React world, maybe we get a little weird, and instead of looping here, we are having two sources of truth, maybe we just make the URL the source of truth. The URL, eliminate the loop, and the URL becomes what everything listens to. It becomes what everything tells about the search changing, and it becomes what all the data things go to ask. We load the context, instead of loading the context from some piece of state, we load the context that pays attention to the URL. And we don't have our loop anymore. We have a nice one-way flow of data. This is a pattern we now use over and over in Mintel to make shareable URLs up there in that bar to keep and to keep the application stable at the same time. And so now that state up there in the page. It's rocking and rolling. It's our new source of truth. It's doing a great job, honestly. It's not very conventional. It's not going to work for every use case by far, but I don't know, it's a creative solution that we came to through this process of going and backing up. And what's my point? That's kind of my point, is that when you're going through the design process, you should try and keep things simple as much as you can. You should concentrate on that source of truth, but the twist ending is that you should also leave yourself room to back up and be creative and go down a new road. Think of maybe you go back, you don't even get a camel, maybe you rent a dune buggy. You don't even have to stay in the same world you were in before. And that means stopping, not falling victim to the sunk cost fallacy, revisiting the original problem, looking at it from a different angle, totally flip the data flow and see if that works. You might find a solution. This applies to state management, this applies to anything in the design process. So if you take anything away from my little talk today, just that's what I'd like you to think about is don't be afraid to get creative in the design process, back up, and don't stick with your dumb yak decisions. That's all I got. Woo!
Any questions?
Oh yeah, questions? I'll take questions. Yes?
Do you have any rules of thumb for deciding when state should go in the URL versus local?
I mean, honestly, this case, I've picked it's pretty specific because we have the very specific use case of put it in the URL. If your product department isn't whining at you about, I need the URL to be pasteable, don't bother. Like, find it, there are simpler solutions than that, right? Keep it simple means the simplest solution for the use case. This is the simple solution for that use case. But if that's not important to your app, if maybe you've got a great way to generate short shareable links, and you don't. That might be better. There's flexibility is kind of my idea here.
A lot of the tools that we build are corporate tools, so the company will have a subscription, and then there'll be multiple users that are all having access to the same data. So a lot of shareable.
And they
URLs.
share, they pass those URLs. They like passing those URLs around, and they're used to passing URLs around like that. It comes up every time. Every time they come up. Yeah.
Actually, it has to do with something similar a while ago. I'm wondering, did you have to do like a key value pair or something? Did you have to do any kind of coding of data?
Oh, that's an excellent question. We actually did. I didn't get in. Time is short, so I didn't get into all that. But yes, we started out with just key value pairs in the of query params, right? Just with a few small things, that's no problem. We got a new use case for the app itself that says, oh, these users now they need to search an arbitrary number of things at the same time. So, and each of those searches could have every country in the world included in it. Well, this URL is much too long at this point. So yes, we actually do with one of the apps my team works on, we actually do encode it. We compress, and the URL ends up being always like 1,000 characters long or something, which is long, but not as crazy as it would be if we were spelling out the name of every country in the query parameters. So yeah, we use a text compression, just a simple text compression algorithm that spits out looks like a hash value. So yeah, if you need to put a lot of stuff in there, that's an option, but I don't know, we're starting to, I feel like that's getting on the edge of sweaty yak, personally. Anybody else? Yeah?
Where did you come up with the yak thing?
I got it from a former architect here, from Ray. Was the first person to say it to me, and I liked it.
I was wondering if you actually shaved a yak before.
I never have, and I never would, because I'm philosophically opposed to it. Yeah.
So I'm rolling with the shave the yak concept here. So I'm thinking about planning for an MVP, right?
Mhm.
If you're planning or if you're in the early stages of building an MVP, do you recommend, let's say, just having enough state to get your app working for the MVP, or are you gonna think about like down the line, like I imagine this, I want this app to be scalable?
That's a very tough question. I mean, I would, what I do as an engineer in that situation is I go to my product person and my project person, and I say, okay, I try to quantify, okay, I can keep this simple and it just works, it just does this one thing right now, and that will take this amount of time and resource. I can, if we look ahead and I see it needs to do this in a year from now, and you want me to be ready for that, then it will take this time and resource, but it will save us this later. Like if you can quantify that, then you can, if you can quantify that, then you can make somebody else choose for you. Right? Present those options and then pass the buck. I think if I'm making that decision just totally for myself and I have unlimited resources, I'm gonna look maybe like, I'm gonna look a couple steps ahead, and I'm going to say, what can I do that's the simplest that gets it working right now, that I'm not shooting myself in the foot later. If I can make it simple now in such a way that I lift out the simple and add the new complexity, awesome. If the simple right now is a completely different path from what it needs to be, then it's probably worth taking a few extra steps down the good path now. That would be my thought process.
So I'm a little bit confused, like the users, they copy and paste the URL, or would they prefer like a button that says like copy URL?
They prefer to copy from the browser bar.
You
Yes,
can't-
that is a
you
great
can-
question, and a button that says,
I-
give me a shareable link is a great idea. They prefer it to
Like
paste.
a shareable link is that you can also like have like a system where you have saved
For
links,
sure, yes.
and then you have they can custom name them.
A great option. Architecturally, our single page apps, we have, it's a pain in the butt to save a generic little piece of persistent state like that, like the URL and keep that, like to do the bit.ly kind of thing and say, okay, this, ask my data store, oh, this shortened URL maps to this long one. Architecturally, that's kind of a pain in the butt for us specifically. If you've got an architecturally easy way to set up to like, oh, I can make a quick Redis table or something that does this, like Redis is not the right thing for it, but I've got a quick, easy way to put it in a data store. A+, yes, I would go for that. And even just the concept of the click, awesome. Our users, they prefer to put it up there. Here's the other problem with that affects our user use case is, I get a shareable link, I go to it, I'm on my site. Next thing I do is I tweak it a little bit. I change the search, and then I paste it again. That URL, I would expect, our users would expect that URL to immediately be different. They don't want to click share again. They're gonna just paste again, and if it's still the old shareable URL without their changes on it, they're gonna get confused, they're gonna get upset. Which is not to say the idea of the show, that's an awesome idea, which is gonna work for probably most of the time. Engineering's a game of edge cases and a game of very specific use cases sometimes. And that's why, to go back to my main point, it's important to be flexible and say, okay, maybe this out of the box solution doesn't work because my use case is so specific and my users have this little quirk that's something that's probably better, like objectively better, is not exactly right for this. So let's find exactly the right thing. Let's not go down that road. Let's turn to another path. Yep.
Is there a way to manage state if someone's manipulating the graph in some way? You can grab the URL and
That is an excellent question. We have a couple different graphing solutions here at Mintel. We've got our own library that wraps high charts. And when we use that, everything you do in the graph will, a lot of times there'll be actions you take within a graph that will alter search and alter that URL state. We can do that when we've got custom event handlers built into all those graphs that they click the point, they drag, did whatever, they're messing around with down there. One other tool we use is Looker, which was a lot harder because anything that happens inside the Looker iframe, Looker, if you don't know, is a data visualization solution owned by Google that makes it very easy to build data visualization dashboards and then embed them in iframes and pages, but it's a very out-of-the-box static solution, and that's a lot harder to deal with.
Out of curiosity with that, like, I've worked with iframes before, so it's very hard to share state between two iframes.
Yes, it's extremely hard, yes.
Unless you have like a backend server that you set up.
A very tough challenge. Looker provides a very limited set of events that bubble up out of the iframe, so we do as much as we can. The graph sends an event when the user changes filters, and we'll then take that and we'll call that the state of the component, and we will push it up into the URL for the because again, they want that shareable URL. There are a lot of things though that product comes to us and says, oh, I want to do something when they do this in the Looker graph. No, sorry, it's an iframe. It lives in a whole different world. No, it's just gotta say no sometimes.
All right, thank you, Steve. If you want to take like a 2-3 minute intermission while we switch speakers, feel free. And make sure you come back.
It's interesting, like the state from the perspective at the moment, finite state automatic. I think I forget.
That's what
Here's this chart. Very much like
basically, the protocol takes their data and it basically based on the original data, cost of data, new data stuff. I work in the training space. Exactly. You don't know how much our shit, like, remember in the World Cup where Saudi Arabia beat Argentina? And the king of Saudi Arabia declared a new holiday. You know how much that fucking work created? Like literally for 2 days, that's was like all the Slack chat.
we can make something that makes
Yeah, I know.
New Year's is always really fun. It's like changing your
Where it's like every hour. Good. And fast.
There's always a question. Why would he like that?
Yeah, that's
See, I don't even know the experience.
What philosophical concept?
Like instead of a holiday service, not really a microservice. Well, when you're dealing with 50 different exchanges, 50 different countries, each one with their own unique codes. There's a reason why sometimes some people don't use the views on the holiday service, they use the legacy one, which is just a binary.
One second, Bill.
Suffraging is such a wide range of that.
You know, still use
And then there's software that
That is the worst. And Perl, it's literally built in. So you just do like some letter and then code responses. Yeah. And then you use regex or something.
and even more
yeah, exactly.
These factors. Or it's either holiday or disaster. So they have very, very high.
All right, everyone.
Well, in that they're indistinguishable.
All right, before I introduce our last speaker, I just want to mention next month we'll be at M1 Finance, and we already have a speaker confirmed. Experiences, not apps, deploying micro front ends and their BFFs, back end for front ends, by Colin Young. So you'll be probably seeing more info on that in the next day or two. It'll be published on Meetup, so make sure you RSVP for that. All right, and now to get to our main speaker. Multiple time speaker here at React Chicago and GraphQL Chicago. I don't even know what number you're at now, 4 or 5. So yeah, so it's going to talk to us about productionizing React, your React app. So welcome, Mitch.
So Monday night, I was working on this talk, finishing it up, and it was a lot of talking about like setting up Sentry and Datadog and stuff, and I was like, honestly, I think this is kind of boring. So I decided to kind of scrap that and talk a little bit more about like productionizing your system and your code and stuff like that, and I hope that's okay, and I hope it's interesting. So we'll see. So it's never just a button. Agreed? Agreed. Okay, perfect. Also, I was going to say this. I do not like a quiet audience, so this is going to require like a lot of participation from this group, if that's cool. Okay, let's start. I'm Mitch Meja. React, React Native, Node, Elixir, Closure, GraphQL, newly married, pickleball, fishing, all this sort of stuff. If any of this interests you, let's talk later. If you're interested in the stock market, come and find me and my friend Sean in the back there. We have things to discuss. Okay. So one of the first things I want to mention in this talk is like the stuff I say up here, is it the right way? I don't know.
It is the way.
It is a way, but it's a way. The way. It's a way that worked for me, and I don't know. You know, who knows? But I have worked at a couple places, so I've seen a bunch of stuff, and this is the stuff that I like. Who here writes React? Okay, excellent, super. It is amazing and revolutionary, and if you've ever written like jQuery, this was kind of painful, yeah? And then we could go to something like this, and it was kind of a big deal. Like, this really changed the way that we build apps, and it was awesome. So, if you remember jQuery, does anyone remember this? Hands, yeah? Anybody? Keep them up. Keep them up. Everyone look around the room and see who has their hands up. You guys are the old people. Okay, excellent. I got less laughs than I thought it would. Okay. Who's deployed a React app? Okay, excellent. Good crew. And like, it's pretty awesome. Did you use these providers? Vercel, Netlify, all this stuff? Like, it's, do you have a question? Or?
No, I'm just keeping my hand up.
Oh,
I need to tell us to put it down.
You can put it down. That's okay. Yeah, sorry.
You guys should be so compliant. That's not a good sign.
Unless Simon says more. You know. Like, these are pretty sweet compared to, you know, like having to figure out your own AWS deployment or GCP or any of that stuff. Like, it's pretty much git push and you're good. And you've got like preview environments and environment variables that sync between local and remote. And like, it doesn't cost that much. Sometimes it costs a lot, I don't know. They have great integrations and everything's serverless. You don't really have to worry about like scaling, you know? And like Netlify forms and Vercel domains and stuff. It's pretty awesome. Quick round of applause for all them. They're great. Yeah. So if you've deployed a React app, who here has debugged a React app? Yeah. Woof. You know, that's tough when you see that in the console. And you're like, oh man, what do I even do? And hopefully you're using like a Sentry or something, like you've uploaded source map somewhere, so like when your customer takes a screenshot and sends this in, you're not just totally looking blind. Has anybody been there before? And it's like the pit of despair and you're sad and everyone's sad and you know the world is dark and somber. Yeah. Okay. So if we take a step back and think about like our jobs as developers, we support business functions. We're not just building products, we're not just building apps, whatever. We build and then we maintain and extend. And the way I think it breaks down is kind of about like this. You build like 23% of the time, you maintain 36% of the time, and then you extend 40% of the time. And you might say, Mitch, where's the other 1%? And I would say that's generally on Hacker News. Again, less laughs than I was thinking, but that's okay. That's all right. So this is kind of the way I think about our jobs, is we've got like this whole circle of productivity and this whole circle of longevity, and there's a small place where they intersect, which is like our success. Because you want to be productive and build things fast, and then you also don't want your life to be a nightmare in 6 months, right?
So that's an inner join, right?
This could be an inner join, yeah. Great call out, I love it. And like productivity for developers gets a lot of love. There's a lot of investment that goes into this, a lot of VC money, you know, starter templates and file generators and stuff like that. And we have like frameworks and packages and APIs and like all the platform as a service, Vercel, Netlify, all that stuff, and that's great. And I want to play a little game about this to show how much love productivity gets. So I'm going to read off all of these icons here. And if you used it, this is the interactive part. I want both hands in the air. If you heard of it, I want one hand in the air. Otherwise, no hands in the air. Is everybody ready? Should we do a demo?
Sure.
Okay, React. Thank you, excellent. This is working fantastic. Angular. Next. Vue. Rails. Gatsby. Ember. I wish this was being videoed because this is, I mean, this is so cool to see how much love all these productivity tools get.
It could be.
Svelte? SvelteKit? Anybody? Okay, a lot have heard of that one. Me too, I've never used it. Nuts, Laravel, Flask, Django, Remix, Phoenix, Spring Boot. I think I got all these. Okay, pretty good, right? So like, if you looked around the room, you could see we've all heard of these productivity tools because like they help us build apps fast, and that's the productivity circle. But I don't think we're gonna have as much love for the longevity circle. And my plan was to read the rest of these. I'm not gonna do that, I think that would be kind of boring, but I do like the game. So when it comes to longevity, I wanna talk about longevity in like 4 different sections. There's longevity of your code. Like, is this good? Is this gonna stand the test of time? Your system, like how often is this whole thing gonna fall down? Are we gonna be talking about a rewrite within 6 months? Because like we just rushed through this and it's gonna be a nightmare to maintain. The business, does the business have the right tools to be able to survive for years to come? Is that what you're building, or are you just building products? And then finally, peace of mind. Because like, I like to sleep, anybody? Okay, cool. Anybody like to get woken up at 3 a.m. with a ping? No? Okay, it's about what I expected. You want to live like a calm, nice life and not have your code run your life. And that to me is longevity. And has anybody done this? Your life in weeks?
Yeah.
Very scary. Don't like it. But I thought it was good to show here because it's important. Because like, if we're gonna develop for the next 10, 20, 30 X years, like we have a long way to go. So like, we have to focus on longevity. If, you know, everyone in the tech sphere is talking about burnout and all this stuff. Like, let's build systems that help us, that work within the context of our lives. So when we talk about longevity, like, yes, we could do the hands here, and we probably all heard of these things and we probably do some of them, but maybe not to the extent that we should. And that's documentation, tests, contracts, isolation, observability, and the control plane. And there's probably a lot more to longevity that we're not gonna talk about here, but like, these are the ones that I wanna talk about a little bit. And some of this is gonna be in the context of React and some of it's not. Again, is this the right way? I don't know. Documentation. Who here has seen something that looks like this? Again, with the hands, yes, no, maybe. Like, maybe someone writes a radio button somewhere in the system where the values are yes and no instead of true and false, and you have to do this whole like encoding, decoding thing, and it's like, all right, yeah, we can do it, but maybe somebody writes it with a nested ternary or like all this stuff, and it's like, oh man, like, whoa, that's gonna be rough. And that's in a PR. And then somebody leaves you this feedback. Hey, this is kind of confusing. Can you please add some documentation? What does everybody do?
Comments in the code.
Yeah, okay, we go add some comments in the code, but what do those comments look like? Checks whether an input is true.
Exactly.
Great. You know, like, this is, yeah, it's documentation. It's kind of like useless documentation, right? And then you get this. Because you added your documentation and the reviewer says, you know what, I have too much going on today. Looks good to me. Yes, no, have we been there? We've seen stuff like that. Audience participation, thank you. Okay, great. So now, you've been working at this company a long time, maybe like 3 months. And, okay, thank you. This is my stand-up routine. So, you've been working here for 3 months, and then, anybody know Mike? Product manager Mike? Every company's got him, he's there, and he comes in and says, hey, a customer reported that their input yes came back as true. Does anyone know what's up? And you see that message and you try to ignore it, and then in the back of your mind comes anxiety. Yeah. Great. And this is bad for that whole longevity thing we were talking about, right? So
Came back as Noel.
Noel, yeah, Noel, yes, true, you know, exactly, yes. And it's, so then you say, okay, well, I probably know what's causing this. And you look back here and you see this documentation. And you say, well, what was I even thinking? What was, you know, X, Y, Z in your git blame even thinking? And you get nothing. Because this documentation is like no effort and no help. So here's my proposal on documentation. Take your time, because it's equally as important as the code. And a lot of people will say, like, you know what, the code is self-documenting. Frankly, it's not. Because you might get like what the code does, but you don't know why it does it. And you don't know what the motivations were at the time where it was written and what was going on with the rest of the system and the company and all this stuff. So like, here's what I say. And it's, take your time, because the documentation is important. Write like a person and capture like the motivation of what you were thinking when you wrote this code, or like why, what was going on at the time in the system. And like, you might know you had to refactor this later, but you know what, we gotta get it out. We've got the release tomorrow, there's a code freeze, all this stuff, we need to get it out. And then like, don't be afraid to like reference documentation in the code, or like a link about where you found some code. Anyone know Stack Overflow? Anyone ever copy code from Stack Overflow? Okay, right? And then that gets lost in the ether until someone picks it up and it's like, what is this crazy thing? So like, yeah, write good documentation and take your time with it, because our jobs are to build, maintain, and extend systems, and it's hard to do that without an understanding of what was going on. Is it, okay, I said that pretty authoritatively. Is it the right way? I don't know. But like, I've worked at a couple places and it works for me. Shoot.
I guess a question that I have in my head is, I think a lot of people probably are ideally thinking, yeah, that's probably great.
Yeah.
But how do we, I don't know how to even ask this, but how do we make sure we motivate ourselves to do it, or how do you know anyone's gonna be motivated to do it? Because I mean, there's a lot of things that I feel like I idealize and then don't do, because I forget or whatever, you know?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And you know, you're not gonna be perfect. You're not gonna do it every time. You're not gonna do it in every place you should, but like, I think it kind of starts with us. And it starts with you saying, you know what, I want to make this a little easier on myself when there's a bug in the system 6 months from now. So I'm gonna use my foresight and take a little time and do it.
So just habit building.
Habit building, sure.
Mitch.
Yeah.
Let me throw my 2 cents in. on
Shoot,
that.
yeah.
I think the number of times you go back and you have to fix your code, you know, 3, 6, 12 months after you've written it, and you say, what the heck was I thinking when I did this? Why did I do this? And you start realizing, if I leave myself notes, it's going to be much better when I have to fix it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or half B, if you're in the back end, compile it into a mystery binary and then leave the company.
I'm not gonna endorse it, but it is one way to go. But yeah, I mean, you guys know what I'm saying here. Like, it takes a little extra effort up front, but it pays dividends forever. And not just for you, but for the other developers on your team. Okay, good on documentation. And I know this isn't like productionizing React, but it's stuff you can put into React because it's kind of a universal concept.
Before we leave documentation,
Yeah.
is there ever a thing is too much documentation?
Probably. Yeah, I would say too much documentation would be the stuff that no one's gonna read. Because then it's just there to be there, you know? So just the stuff that's useful. Tess.
I have a for comments.
Yeah, shoot. Yeah.
And I know in .NET there's a like comment formats.
Uh-huh.
Is there? It might be a stupid question as well, but is there comment formats in React? You can, for instance, if you list above a method, you can insert the parameters into the comment and say what the parameters are supposed to be.
Yeah, there are. I don't know if there's like an exact React specific one, but there are JavaScript and TypeScript documentation formats. The one that comes to mind is JSDoc, and it's like a well-prescribed format. Tess, anyone know what this is? Shout it out.
Testing pyramid.
Testing pyramid. Thank you, audience. Okay. My philosophy on tests. Code coverage as a goal. Write tests based on how much confidence you want to have in your system. And we'll get into that. So like unit tests. Unit tests test logical units of code, a function, a component, something like that. And when would I actually write a unit test? Well, if there's complicated logic, if I'm worried 6 months from now that I'm gonna come back and break something, or if I'm worried that someone else on my team is inadvertently gonna break something, or if it's gonna help other people onboard. So like, I think what you guys can see here is I'm taking a very like human-centric approach to code. We can write code that's like super performant and like just the code, you know, and focus on that and try and make it perfect. But like we work on teams, we work with other people. So like, let's extend our thinking to the human side of this. So like unit tests, we have this function. I would say this is complicated and I don't want to break it and I don't want anyone else to break it because that's going to break our system, which is going to lower my confidence that everything is right and acting as it should be. So what is a unit test? A unit test is basically going to test like just this function in isolation. And I try to exclude everything else, every other dependency, every integration, whatever, and test it with a bunch of different inputs that, you know, have very well-defined outputs. There's no non-determinism here. It's just given an input. You know, I like to think of this in a functional way. You can directly map it to an output. And like, yeah, has anyone written unit tests here? Okay, a bunch of folks. Like, this is pretty standard. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, we don't need to spend too much time on this, I don't think. Integration tests. This is the middle layer of the testing pyramid. And I want to read something. Integration testing involves integrating the various modules of an application and then testing their behavior as a combined or integrated unit. Verifying if the individual units are communicating with each other properly and working as intended post-integration is essential. 3 times, integration in the definition of integration testing. I literally don't know what this means. Like, I've been like writing software professionally for like 10 years, and every time someone talks about an integration test, I'm like, I don't know. So in my own projects, like I don't generally attempt it, and I don't try and hit this middle layer because like I don't know what it is, and I don't know how much confidence it's going to give me if I can't even define the test very well. I can't talk about it. I don't know what it's giving me. And like a lot of these tests will have like mocks or stubs or spies. People familiar with that? Maybe through like just.spy, just.function, or just.fn. Like it does something, it like injects a function into your thing. I don't know. And like a lot of times, to me, it looks like this, where if I'm grabbing like exchange rates, I'll like mock fetch to do the thing, and then like inject that into my React component because it makes a fetch call or something. And I'm like, well, what if the API changes? Like what, like, I don't know. this seems very strange to me, because like this does not give me the confidence when I'm going through a CI/CD process to click deploy. So like thoughts on integration tests, like if there's an integration piece, I don't know what that is, like mapping data from an API request or something. So like imagine we take these rates and we map over them, and then we change the structure of the object to be like label, CAD, value 1.42, something like that. Like I would try and take that function that knows how to map the data coming from the API request and then turn that into like a function that I can unit test, because it has a very well-defined input and output, but without mocking the fetch to do the thing to call the hook to inject it into the component. Like that's all very complicated and doesn't provide me high confidence. And then like, yeah, the mock that you have might diverge from what the actual API returns. So again, it's like, oh, now I have another thing to keep in sync? I don't know. Yeah, I wish I had one of those slides in, like right in the middle here that's like, is this right? I don't know. Cause I don't know, but it's what I think. End-to-end tests. Anyone write end-to-end tests? Yeah, all right, cool. Dig it. These are huge. These are high confidence, these are my favorite, but they are hard. Unit tests are easy. We looked at unit tests. You can boot up Jest, you don't need any other dependencies, you don't need a new environment, all this stuff. It's just a function. It has inputs and outputs. But end-to-end tests, you program as a user. You program to click the button. You program to type the text. And like, there are now, this used to be extremely, extremely difficult. Anyone, Selenium? Yeah, tough. two thumbs down, tough. But there's some new like libraries in town that make this not too bad. One of them, my favorite, Playwright. I think it's like I don't know if it's built on top of this or like it was built in parallel, but Puppeteer was kind of like a precursor to this. That was pretty popular. But like, here, we are literally programming the browser to do things like a user. Hey, go to this URL and expect it to have like the HTML title of X. And then like click on the link and await the page load and wait for it to fetch the data and then check the data and all this. And this to me is huge. I mean, like, I'll write some unit tests where the logic is real complicated, but what if I want to know that login works? Like, this is what I'm doing. And you can do this in your React apps, you can do it in your server-side apps, you can do whatever you want here, but like, I think it's becoming a fairly standard practice to do this. And in all the places I've worked, the places that have end-to-end tests move way faster. They just kind of do. Is it right? I don't know, but it's kind of what I've seen. So like, yeah, I like Playwright. Anyone know what a test ID is? Yeah? Not sure if we use them, or maybe not, but there is a whole class of HTML attributes that are prefixed with this data dash something. And I think it's used for like HTML, I don't even know what to call them, actions. Like you can attach data attributes to do certain things, but like one of these is data test ID, which like you can use to find specific elements in your test code. And it can get stripped out before you send it to prod, which is pretty useful. And like this can be huge, because what if you're changing your copy all the time, or you're like trying to test some dynamic data? You might not know what comes back from the API in an end-to-end test, but you'll always know a consistent data test ID. So this can help make your end-to-end tests in React or whatever you're building really robust, because there's a problem with end-to-end tests, which is that they can be flaky, because like servers are flaky and environments are flaky and networks and all this sort of stuff. But like, this is one way to help yourself help yourself. Cool? Cool. Oh, okay, yeah. End-to-end tests, kind of hard to retrofit into a system. If you're starting brand new, much easier. You can set it up from the start, and you can think about all the utilities that you need around end-to-end tests from the start. So like I mentioned here, clean up your toys. And cleaning up your toys is hard because like, let's say we're running an end-to-end test where the user has to log in and update their profile picture, something like that. Well, you actually need a user to do that. So like when you're writing your end-to-end tests, it's really important that you're not just writing the tests, you are writing utilities to create test data in an actual environment on your server. And maybe that's through like a test API call that has special authorization or something like that. Or you can interact with your server directly, like that would be great. But like you want to create your data, and then you want to be able to clean up your test data. Because if you're ever testing this in like your staging or your demo environment or something like that, these are all of the tangential things that you have to think about, like to make your end-to-end test extremely robust and provide you the confidence that you need. And again, like this isn't React specific, this is code specific and like system specific, but you can do all of this within the context of React. Advice on tests, kind of similar to documentation. Take your time. It is equally as important as your code. And the last one here is really what I want to drive home about tests. Like, unit tests are great, and they can be super useful around complicated code. But like, write the tests, they give you the confidence to deploy at 4 p.m. on a Friday. Yeah? No?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay. That's what I'm talking about. Is it right? I don't know. But it's worked for me. Contracts.
Mitch?
Yeah, sure.
One thing you talked about for creating unit tests.
Yeah, keep going.
To me, if a module or piece of code has a history of getting broken by people's changes, you're going to want to add unit tests for that. And I don't know that you've had that or considered that in your list.
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, if there's a history of breaking around like one part of the code, people will say like, oh, you know, don't touch that. That's really fragile, or like that's pretty complicated. Don't do that. Like write tests around it so that if it breaks, you know, and you don't deploy the broken thing. And we can do this, and it's amazing. But sometimes we just don't. Contracts. We like to write functions that do things for us. They encapsulate logic, and it's great. And let's say I want a list of I want to fetch all of a user's orders. I might have a function called getOrders that returns a list of orders. Great, but like, then what? What if someone says, hey, you know what? I have 300 orders, and I don't want to return them all in that. Let's actually go to this. This is update user. I think the orders example is better. Let's say we don't want to return all 300 orders at once. Well, like now we need some pagination information that takes like a limit and an offset or a cursor or however you want to do your pagination, but we're still returning just a list of items. But that doesn't tell us anything about like how many items are there? What about the number of pages? What's the start cursor and the end cursor and all this stuff? So like, these are the contracts that I'm talking about, the inputs and outputs to your functions. And like, you can always change logic, but changing contracts is hard. And that's something that has to be considered very carefully. So like, this is one of my biggest points in this whole talk, is this doesn't just have to be for functions like update user, it can be for React components too. like maybe you don't want to pass all the props from, you know, like your Redux store through 4 layers down to this component. Like pick your props and consider when you're building a component, how is this going to be used? And what's the optimal way for this to be used? So this is like an update user function, and we can just go through this example real quick, where like, hey, we want to update the user. We're going to take a partial, anyone write TypeScript? Yeah? Excellent. We're going to take a partial of the user and update them and return an updated user? Cool. How do we know if it worked? Anyone? Maybe if the user gets returned, cool. But then we're like diffing to see what changed and all this. Like that's complicated. So like in your contracts, we can do better. So like we can change the inputs and we can say, hey, you know what? Let's take a user ID and then we want to take a subset of options to be able to update this user, but we want to take the ID and the options separately. So like, let's omit several properties of the user because we don't want to allow those to be passed in. Great, and this helps us in TypeScript and all that, and that's cool. And that's a little better. But I think we can get way better, because what if we don't just modify the input, but we actually modify the output of this function as well? So while you're taking a user ID and updatable params, like what, you know, whatever we want to call it, we're not just returning an updated user here. We're actually returning an update user result, which has optional properties for like, what was the error that happened here? And like, what's the status of this? Did it work? Did it not work? And then maybe if it didn't fail, we're also going to return the user. And this gives us so much flexibility and the potential for extensibility and maintainability moving forward, which are most of our jobs, like we talked about, right? We're not just building something that updates a user, because like from a consumer perspective, we need to know if there was an error, is this error retryable? Was it a network error? Was it a database error? Does it require manual developer intervention or what? You know, and there's all this to it, but I think contracts are critical. If you want to get deeper into this, if anybody's used validation libraries, there's something called Zod, which I'll recommend, which is super cool. And you can create these like validatable objects from which you can infer types to kind of have this whole derivation chain from like something that's really going to work at runtime and validate you're passing in a valid email or something, or a URL or something like that, down to like the compilation time success when you infer this types from the type that could be validated. There's a lot of talking, but make sense? Yeah? Okay. Cool. Advice on contracts: specify inputs well, really important. Return not lists or just objects, but like boxes, where you'll throw stuff in the box, and then you can take whatever you want out of the box. And the box has all sorts of stuff in there for you to take it. You want to validate your inputs and fail early, and return error codes with like well-defined errors if you have them, because that's going to allow the consumers of the functions to respond better and give your users of your system a better experience. Is it right? I don't know, but it's worked for me. Isolation. This goes directly along with contracts, and it talks about like, when you are working on a system that not just you built, and you don't know everything about the system, but you know, you're working at a company or something, and you want to make a change, that is scary, because there's years of knowledge encoded in the functions that have been written there. So like, when you write a function, you want to think about, if this function breaks, what's the blast radius of that change? Is that going to bring down the whole system, or is it just going to cause like a GraphQL mutation to fail that you'll fix tomorrow? Something like that. Low blast radius, high confidence when you're deploying. We always want high confidence to deploy at 4 p.m. on a Friday. And because of this isolation, Everyone knows dry code, don't repeat yourself. I don't write dry code. Because I think when you try and write dry code and you like combine the functionalities of a lot of stuff and pass in flags or something like that, you wind up, okay, one sec, Mike is coming back. But like, let's say we build a function to fetch a user by ID, great. Mike says, hey, can we also fetch this user by email? And everyone looks and says, oh, Mike, come on, you know? So now you have this function fetch user that can take an email or a user ID. Like, you've expanded the blast radius. When really what I'm proposing is, like, instead of making this one generic fetch user function used everywhere in your code, have two. Fetch by ID, fetch by email. You make a change to one, you don't have to worry about every other place where fetch by ID is used. And this can be React when you're mapping data, like when you're building a component, whatever. You have a component with like a left arrow icon, you could add a prop where you can pass the icon into that. Or you can say, also make a button with a loading state. Something like that, or a button with a different icon. Because like maybe you won't have that many of them in your code, and yeah, it's less dry, and you might have to make a couple more changes, but you have such higher confidence as you continue to maintain and extend your systems. Because you just don't have to worry about everything else. Okay, we're gonna skip through that. Here's a concept of React-specific isolation, and I don't want to go over time, so we're gonna go through this rather quickly. Anyone ever build a user profile component? Yeah, page, something like that? You might use GraphQL, and then you say, hey, use query with a query string that takes in a variable. Great. And then when we get the user, we want to track them in the analytics context, and then we want to set the error tracking context as well. And that's in an effect here in the use profile, which really doesn't have anything to do with the user profile. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with the business logic, so why is it all in here? And then like, oh, if there's an error when we're fetching the user, we need to see what kind of error code came through because we have strong contracts, and then show that error message potentially to the user. Fine, great. And it's all in here, and that's cool. But that's kind of a lot to think about. Stuff that doesn't specifically have to do with the user profile component. So here's what I'll say. I am a big fan of the idea of abstracting your data away from the UI layer. And I like to do that through custom hooks, where we can have something that's like use user, and then out of this query, it fetches the query. You know, we go and we make the query. Maybe we'll mentalize our data this time, something we didn't do in our like bigger page component. So we'll like fetch the user. And then we can still run the effect in here, but that's totally abstracted away from the UI layer of our app. So you can use this hook wherever you want and fetch a user by ID, but without having to think about everything else. And again, this like isolates the side effects, the data and stuff from all your other concerns. So if you go and make a change to the UI layer of user profile, you don't have to worry, crap, am I messing up the error tracking context? And this is just like one method I like for isolation. This is a React specific thing. I would recommend it. It's been extremely useful. And now, here, this is a really important point. You're not actually deriving the full name of the user inside your UI layer, but you're doing that in your hook because you can. And then you're exposing an extremely small interface from this hook. Use user. And this is all about contracts as well. Contracts and isolation, only exposing exactly what the UI layer needs. So all this stuff kind of blends together to give us longevity and peace of mind. I'm not going to cover this, consider recoverability, but like, here's what I would say about isolation. The places that have too much dry code that I've worked move slower than the ones that don't. And that's just kind of what I've seen. Prefer specific functions that do one thing. And then when you change something, you don't have to worry about everywhere else. And like, yeah, you might have some duplicate code, and that's okay. In React, hooks that encapsulate queries and like derive data from the results of those can be extremely useful. And because we have strong contracts coming from the server or something, our APIs return boxes, not lists, we can do really interesting things with our error codes and stuff like that, where we can let users retry if it's a recoverable error. Or we don't have to let them retry if it's something that requires developer or like manual intervention. Is it right? I don't know, but it's worked for me. I promise, I'm almost done. I'm gonna go through this stuff real quick, and then we'll get you out of here. Observability. Metrics, traces, and logs. Anyone? Yeah? Metrics are your KPIs, your graphs, your response times, stuff like that. Stuff you can take a sampling of. You can do that in multiple ways with traces and logs as well. But metrics give you graphs, I like to think about. Traces, if you have 3 services and a database, let you see the life cycle of a request through all your services. See where the bottlenecks are, see where the errors happen, stuff like that. Extremely useful. You can get those through a tool like Datadog or New Relic or AppSignal, something like that. And then logging. Logging is what I want to talk about today because I think that's most relevant to the React crew. And then I'll talk about a couple other things. Logging, do a lot of it. When something breaks, you'll wish you had more. I've rarely been in a situation where I felt like I had too much. You want to pay close attention and log a lot around complex code. Should be fairly obvious. It's analogous to what we talked about with tests. Make it human. You know, like just having a machine readable string is nice. But like you also want to be able to read and scan and understand what happened. But you also want to make it machine readable. So here's what I'll say. In Elixir, which is a language I like a lot, there is a logger that has multiple log levels. And you can say logger.info.warn, .error, .debug, .critical, whatever. This is a lot of levels. How do you know the difference between a critical and an error? Or an emergency and an alert? If you know, tell me. I don't. So there's an article I really like, and it's linked here, Wake Me Up in the Middle of the Night. And this is the way I like to think about logging, is that we have logs for debugging. We have logs that we should look at some point. Something's breaking, but it's not really critical. We have logs where we should look tomorrow. And then there's stuff that's, holy crap, wake me up in the middle of the night. And you can write these wrappers around your console.logs or whatever goes to Sentry or whatever APM you're using. But like, use log levels appropriately. And I'll wait for the picture. Yeah. Check out this article. I'm gonna send the slides in the link, and they have a great explanation of this. So here's what I like. I'll normally have something like a log. I seriously do this. Like, I don't just use console log or like whatever logger. I will write log functions that make it extremely explicit what to do. Not important. Like, no, this isn't really important. I can filter those out when I'm actually trying to debug something. Look tomorrow. Like, yeah, that's something, it needs to be fixed, and you can look at it tomorrow. But it's not wake me up in the middle of the night. But what you can see here is I have log statements before and after what happens. Because like, why not? It doesn't really hurt us. You might add some log volume. You might like have to pay a little more, but odds are, like, paying a little more is gonna be a lot cheaper than the developer time that it takes to debug something. So like, have logs and have appropriate logs that are both searchable and human. APM solutions, I don't really have time to go into this, but use one. Sentry, great for error tracking. Datadog, great for metrics, logs, and traces. Highlight is a new one that's out now for Next.js, I think is their focus, and it seems great. I haven't played with it personally, but I'm really excited to. These give you all the observability sorts of tools that we talked about. And when you do logging in like a cohesive way that tells you, gives you prompts what to do, these become even more useful. Tips for APM solutions, invest in it heavily, don't half-ass it. If anyone's ever set up Sentry, like uploading source maps takes a little extra time. Do it. It's the same thing with logging, it's the same thing with tests. Like, it's an investment now that's gonna pay dividends later.
So like in those functions, like not important, look tomorrow.
Yeah.
Where do those go? Like, do they go to like a different, like,
If I'm using like the console logger, I'll just write a function that takes those arguments from not important and passes them right into the console logger. So it's the same interface and everything, just with a more intuitive name.
Console logger, you mean that
Like,
would display in the console of the browser?
Yes, but if you're using some of these like APM solutions, your console logs can also show up there.
Or you can send them straight to.
You can send them, there's a ton
capture
of ways
log.
to configure it. Front end, back end, they all have different implementations, but like, pick an APM solution and then see what they recommend for logging, and then you can wrap whatever their API is up in this to give you your own interface on top of that that's meaningful to you.
So do you mean like those go into like different databases or like different pages to view later?
Yes, if you're using something like Sentry, you can view all the logs that come in.
Are you saying more for like error messaging, instead of it just being whatever the standard error is, you'll have your own custom thing where it'll say, this is how critical it is, like a human readable message? Like
Yeah, exactly. So like in the not important, I might prefix that message with not important, and then I can filter that out of my logs. Or I might say, wake me up in the middle of the night, and then prefix that in the logs, and if that ever comes in, use an alert.
So
Use like a Sentry alert to message me in Slack.
So that little function kind of adds a little bit more text that you decide whatever.
You can do, yes. It's your playground to do whatever you want with to make it work for you. And you can prefix it, you can add arguments, you can do whatever you'd like there. If you do use alerts through APMs, noise will kill you. If you get 1,000 Datadog alerts a day, that's extremely painful, and all of them become useless because no one's gonna look through all of them. So use alerts extremely judiciously. Is it the right way? I don't know, but it's worked for me. I promise this is the last thing, and I'll get you out of here. The control plane. Anyone here ever taken a shower? Okay, great. When you're in the shower, we're not getting too intimate here, I promise. When you're in the shower, anyone ever change the temperature? Yeah? Okay. What would happen if every time you wanted to change the temperature, you had to call a plumber? That would be extremely painful and horrible, right? Like, we probably wouldn't shower, we'd smell terrible. That's basically how a lot of people build apps right now. They don't allow themselves to configure the apps at runtime while they don't allow business users of the apps to configure the apps at runtime and change things. I don't know, I used to work for a bank, like changing interest rates. How much money do we want to move today? Are we even allowing deposits right now? Some systems, business users will have to call developers or Slack them or whatever and say like, hey, I need you right now to deploy a change to turn off deposits. Like, we are building businesses. We are not just building products and software. So like, if you take anything away from this talk, the control plane is necessary. And that includes what we were hearing about before with feature flags, configuration values, audit logs, and developer internal and debugging tools. And I'll talk about all these real quick. Feature flags, they let you turn something on and off or change configuration values without deploying your code. And business users can use these, and they are critical. Anytime you, my take, anytime you deploy code, put it behind a feature flag so you can turn it off, or revert it, or do whatever you need. Like, I get asked all the time, hey, should this be behind a feature flag? And my default answer is always yes. Why not? It's generally not that big a deal, and like, it can only help you, only give you more peace of mind, only build your longevity as a developer. And the longevity of your system and your code and all that. And it decouples releases from functionality, which is huge and gives you the confidence to deploy at 4 p.m. on a Friday. Configuration values, same thing, a derivation or variant of feature flags. I used to work for a bank. We used to change configuration values on interest rates and all this stuff all the time. Hugely useful. Saved our ass a couple times. Audit logs. A customer asked for a refund and they bought a hat. Hey, when did we change the price of the hat from $12 to $15? How much do we refund this person? Or does a developer have to go look up into Snowflake time travel and say like, oh crap, when, and then they're bisecting dates and figuring out when did we change this? No, audit logs. And like, yeah, that can be kind of painful, but it's only gonna pay dividends down the line and give you more longevity. Tooling, product manager Mike, he's back for the last time. What's the LTV of this customer? Well, now we're going to write some SQL, which inevitably leads to how to declare a variable in SQL. And then we're all like, oh crap, like what is this, you know? And like, it's really not that hard to introduce like some sort of BI solution, Metabase, like something that business users can use to control and own the business. We're building businesses, we're not just building products. Advice on the control plane, products are awesome, we build businesses. It's amazing to me that this isn't the standard. And I think we can change that. Because we want peace of mind and longevity moving forward. Is it the right way? I don't know, but it's worked for me. Productivity, longevity, we want to be in the middle, and it's hard, but I think it's worthwhile trying to get there. Thank you. I hope it was remotely interesting. Okay. Questions or anything? Did I cover everything so well that there's nothing? You guys are tired of hearing me talk?